Welcome to Radio 64. Welcome to Radio 64 Video Game Music Remix Radio. I'm your host, Eric Mickles, also known online as duskvstweak. Radio 64 is part of the Radio Meanwhile network. You can visit radiomeanwhile.com for more information about this and other great podcasts. Share your thoughts on this episode, and request music by following the show on Facebook or Twitter at Radio64Pod. Please rate, subscribe, share this show on Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. We opened the show with Gran Valse Mario by Bladiator from ocremix.org from the game Super Mario World, and that is remixing the overworld background music from Super Mario World in a lovely, fun piano solo piece. Not too long, doesn't overstay its welcome, and as fun as it is, it's still a very impressive piece. Hearing that technique that's involved with that remix is very impressive. Just always nice to hear a very classy take on Mario. Mario's a lot of fun. He's a plumber. He knows how to get things done, but he can be very classy when he wants to be. So, again, Gran Valse Mario by Bladiator from ocremix.org from the game Super Mario World, one of the most classic of classic games out there. And I don't have a Switch, but I'm pretty excited about that Super Mario 3D World All-Star Collection, Super Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, and Super Mario Galaxy all getting put together in one big collection. Might actually be enough to get me a Switch, because I never played Sunshine or Galaxy. And yeah, seems like the right kind of value for me right there. Up next is an electric guitar piece coming from Darangen, who has provided us with some really interesting vocals in the past, but this is just a pure instrumental piece, a little bit more pop in his electric rock stylings here. Part of the reason I like this so much, it comes from the first Final Fantasy game, and it's remixing the Chaos Temple. I think there's just something incredibly innocent about this remix. You know, the original track is just incredibly pretty and so atmospheric. One of my favorites from the original NES game. I think by turning it into this kind of pop rock version, Darangen has made it a little bit more about the party going on an adventure rather than the atmosphere and the history that goes on in that temple. One of the things I like most about the first Final Fantasy is that it just feels like going on an adventure. It feels just like an old Dungeons & Dragons campaign with your friends, and I think that this remix kind of goes along with that. So this is Finally Home by Darangen from ocremix.org from the game Final Fantasy. That was Finally Home by Darangen from ocremix.org from the game Final Fantasy. I'm still kind of shocked how much I enjoyed that first Final Fantasy. Back when I played it, it was on the PS1 collection, the Final Fantasy Origins. But having already played all the 3D ones at the time, this one really did it for me. I was able to go from beginning to end and just enjoy my time with it. It really had a timeless quality to it. But from one NES JRPG to the next, we're on to Dragon Warrior, which came out in 1986 on the NES. This track is going for a much more traditional rendition of that JRPG soundtrack. A lot of trumpet sampling going on. You got some backing choirs in there. It's kind of going through a whole bunch of different movements throughout. It's a bit of an older track, so I think some of the sound samples feel a bit dated, but we haven't featured a track from Dragon Warrior, and this is a game I actually enjoyed playing when they released it on Game Boy Color, I believe. I ended up buying that when I bought my Game Boy Advance, of all things, to go along with my Game Boy Advance purchase at the time, a Game Boy Color game. Go figure. This is Kingdom Come by Tyler Heath from ocremix.org from the game Dragon Warrior. That was Kingdom Come by Tyler Heath from ocremix.org from the game Dragon Warrior. I like some of the harp work in this, and I like how some of the movements of this track will have that kind of Imperial vibe about it. Both this and that Final Fantasy track have that Lost Dungeon source going on, and yet this one is much more traditional, I think. Glad to finally feature something from Dragon Warrior. There's more tracks on the OC remix from that game. It's my fault for not having played them. Alright, this is a rippin' piece up next. It's definitely a swingin' rock remix. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles soundtrack, specifically Turtles 4, Turtles in Time. This is the opening track of the game, the Turtle Swing, which was stage 1. And this track comes from the Shell Shocked album, which is a really rockin' remix album of a whole bunch of Ninja Turtles games. Turtles in Time is the one that I'm always hearing people talk about. It's one I actually didn't play back on the Super Nintendo, and I don't know why. Maybe in 1992, my love for the Ninja Turtles was waning, probably around the same time that my Power Rangers fandom was growing. So I probably missed out, because everybody who ever talks about Turtles in Time is always talking about how much they love that game and how cool it was. What I like about this remix is how much it's actually using that old Ninja Turtles cartoon theme. The main source is fine. It, like I said, it's a swinging track, but I've got nothing but nostalgia for that original Turtles theme that we're hearing in here. So this is Hot for April by Juan Medrano from ocremix.org from the game Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4, Turtles in Time. That was Hot for April by Juan Medrano from ocremix.org from the game Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4, Turtles in Time. In fact, when I first introduced a friend in college to Overclocked Remix, the first thing they went looking for was Turtles in Time tracks, which I just thought was so interesting. It's so telling of how people feel about that game. I like how old school that track can feel with some of its chord progressions, and yet Juan Medrano's just keeping that swing alive with his electric guitar work. A friend of mine actually recently bought himself a Switch and has started playing the Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening remake game that's on there, the one where he looks like a little kind of that toy aesthetic that I know some people who didn't like it, but I think it's incredibly charming, the design. And I think Link just looks as brave as he ever has in that design. So I'm excited for my friend to be playing Link's Awakening. He's never played it before, and this is probably the best way for him to go in. The Link's Awakening on the Game Boy is one of my favorite games, one of my favorite Zeldas, and I find that the original Game Boy aesthetic to just be so wonderful and warm. But I have to admit, it's probably like that Turtles theme we just listened to. There's a lot of nostalgia in that, so I don't necessarily need to play that remake. The original Game Boy game is still one of my most beloved games and a really warm memories. The Game Boy, by its portability, has some of my coziest game memories, the memories where I'm like under blankets or I'm just curled up on a chair, just spending late nights with that magnifying glass and the light, playing it when I should be asleep. Very cozy memories connected to the Game Boy and Link's Awakening specifically. This is remixing the Maeve Village. It starts out kind of a music box, but then DDRKirby lives up to the namesake and turns it into this really fun boppy synth piece that I feel like a lot of Kirby game influence in there. It's just a boppy, bouncy piece. This is Play With Me by DDRKirby, ISQ, from ocremix.org, from the game The Legend of Zelda, A Link's Awakening. Play With Me by DDRKirby, ISQ, from ocremix.org, from the game The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. Lovely piece there. Just pure fun. Just puts a smile on my face listening to that track. We recently did a Legend of Zelda tribute, a Legend of Zelda special for Radio 64, 10 tracks from Legend of Zelda games, and I didn't include any from Link's Awakening, and it felt like a great sin on my part, but there were a lot of tracks I wanted to focus on, mainly in the mainline titles, and Link's Awakening, I think, is so special because it's just so different from the other games. I also didn't include anything from Majora's Mask, so I feel like I am going to have to do a Legend of Zelda special Volume 2 at some point to make up for those past sins. Alright, we got a track from Mazedude here, coming from the NES game Rygar, and it's some really trippy, evil jazz tracks. This sounds like, I've just recently been reading the 90s comic Shadow Man from Valiant Comics. It's so moody, and it's so atmospheric, and it's set in New Orleans. And the character, and the main character, Jack, he's a jazz musician, and there are times when he's playing his saxophone at a jazz show, and the Shadow Man persona takes over. Everybody's always kind of like, wow, that was wild, that was dark, that felt like the jazz of hell. This is what I now am going to think about when I listen to when I read Shadow Man comics. It has some really funky pieces that come in here a little at near the beginning, and then at the end, the chorus, I guess, of this track is just all out. It's a whole bunch of different ideas, and kind of this underworld party that's going on with the trumpet and the kind of industrial sounds that are playing underneath. Just a really strange, interesting piece. I've been loving it. I've been loving that chorus that plays throughout this. This is Trippin' on Snails by Mazedude from ocremix.org from the game Rygar. That was Trippin' on Snails by Mazedude from ocremix.org from the game Rygar, a 1987 NES game. And I listened to the original game because I had never played Rygar back on the NES. That was remixing the Dennis Aguila source from the Rygar game. And the original source is really good, actually. Without being remixed, it's still legitimately a track on fire. It's ridiculous listening to it. Just, I'm always impressed, and I'm always trying to show my wife, look how cool and amazing and talented these people were on the NES with this limited software, this limited resources available of what they were able to do. And I feel like that original source is one of those. You listen to it, you're like, wow, the music that people were able to make on older hardware to this day still fascinates me. Another funky track, this is coming from The Revenge of Shinobi back on the Genesis, the 1989. A really funky piece coming from djpretzel. A very strut and funk kind of sound going on here. The synth work in here is seems very improvised, and at the same time, it doesn't seem like anything in this track was unplanned. It's just ridiculously structured while maintaining that relaxed funk's vibe. I don't have too much to say about Revenge of Shinobi. I played a Shinobi game at one point, but I could not tell you what it is. And I always meant to play that PS2 Shinobi game that had come out, but I kind of got scared away by the reviews talking about how hard it is. This is called Consent, Make Me Dance by djpretzel from ocremix.org from the game The Revenge of Shinobi. That was Consent, Make Me Dance by djpretzel from ocremix.org from the game Revenge of Shinobi. There's something about that kind of sound that actually makes me think of the Genesis Sonic the Hedgehog game. And maybe it's just the kind of style and sounds that you would hear on the Genesis in general. Here's a track that I swore I had played on this show before, but I haven't, and I couldn't believe it. We're listening to a remix of Secret of the Forest from Chrono Trigger. Back on the Super NES. The forest tracks in Chrono Trigger are just lovely. This is taking those lovely moody forest tracks and creating kind of a dark dubstep remix here. And the dubstep is heavy. I've said it before that listening to remixes on OCR are kind of what brought me over to the side of dubstep. When I first kind of heard it, I wasn't really into it. I was thinking like, oh, it's a bit more noise than poise for me. But listening to a lot of these remixes work that way around, I was like, oh, I get what the point of dubstep is. I like the combination of chiptune and dubstep in this to really create this this space travel kind of sound, which is funny because the forest areas in the Chrono Trigger are the most down to earth you can get. A lot going on in this track, but I think it's a really cool piece. This is "Oh Traveler from an Arcane Land" by Jabzizi from ocremix.org from the game Chrono Trigger. That was Oh, Traveler from an Arcane Land by Jabzizi from ocremix.org from the game Chrono Trigger. A classic Chrono Trigger. You don't need me to tell you Chrono Trigger's a classic. I've said it every time I've played a track from Chrono Trigger on this show, and everybody else will tell you it's a classic. You know what? And if you don't like Chrono Trigger, I don't want to know. I think there's a reason we don't hear bad reviews of Chrono Trigger. We don't want to. But more chiptune coming up next, and this is taking the Wicked Child track from the original Castlevania back on the NES and turn it into a real retro dance piece. The first time I heard this back, in 2010, I remember thinking, like, I just need a groove to this. I just need to get on a dance floor and dance away to this track. It's just so cool. It's just so energetic, but it doesn't lose that gothic moodiness of the original Castlevania. And maybe that's just because Wicked Child is just inherently evil in a lot of its ways. You listen to Wicked Child, and it is the track that's playing in the vampire's castle. Absolutely. And what Ben Briggs does here is the track eventually starts sounding a little bit like it's underwater, like you're hearing it from another room. Somebody's playing it too loud, and you're only getting a bit of the heavy bass, and it's all kind of muffled and muted. And then he comes in with the Mount DDD track from Kirby. Just blends them perfectly. The Mount DDD track from the Kirby games sounds like it absolutely fits with this Castlevania track. It's kind of a bit more it's a bit more of a skipping piece, but I think pairing it with Wicked Child was a very smart move. So this is Castlemania 2010 by Ben Briggs from ocremix.org from the game Castlevania. That was Castlemania 2010, or Castlemania 2010, by Ben Briggs from ocremix.org from the game Castlevania. Wow, that track is 10 years old, actually. I didn't even think about that. You know, we're playing a Castlevania trick. It's September. That means Halloween month is on its way. I should have saved that, but we've got another Halloween special planned for this October. And of course, you'll have to listen to the original Halloween special that we did, which is one of my favorite episodes I've done. We'll be throwing in a couple of other like spooky tracks throughout the month. Don't worry. So earlier I mentioned Sonic the Hedgehog, and I have recently finished Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and a lot of the music is really great. A lot of it's really catchy, and then you get to that carnival level, that carnival night zone, and that track that kind of does a hip-hop, dubstep before dubstep version of those classic circus music. It plays so much, and I must have been real bad at that level because that music was going on, and there's just something about it that's just so strange and ridiculous. I mean, it sounds like it's playing in a funhouse of like an old Batman game based off like the 1989 Batman movie with Jack Nicholson's Joker. It just has this warped, you could only hear that sound in the 90s instrumentation. It's crazy how much it lodged itself into my brain. And so, like Batman himself, the only way to conquer my fear is to become it. And so we were playing this remix from actually the album Sonic 3 and Knuckles Project Chaos. This is called 3 Ring Nightfall by Hadyn. A bit synth, a bit electric rock at times, but a lot of it's being done on the mallets. So this, again, is 3 Ring Nightfall by Hadyn from the album Sonic 3 and Knuckles Project Chaos from the game Sonic 3 and Knuckles. That was Three Ring Nightfall by Hadyn from Sonic 3 and Knuckles Project Chaos from the game Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Though I think it's specifically Sonic 3, right? Yes, it's specifically from Sonic 3. Just crazy weird music that got lodged into my brain for weeks. Anyway, that was the last track of the episode. So thank you for listening to Radio 64, Video Game Music Remix Radio. I have been your host, Eric Mickles, also known online as duskvstweak. Radio 64 is part of the Radio Meanwhile network. You can visit radiomeanwhile.com. For more information about this and other great podcasts, please share your thoughts on this episode and request music by following the show on Facebook or Twitter at Radio64Pod. And please rate, subscribe, and share this show on Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.